We are back for another Teach Me Outbound, and this week's a good one. We've got Thibaut Souyris, and he is the founder of SalesLabs, producing some awesome material, coaching, helping out salespeople in a lot of different ways. So before we get into it, Thibaut, do you want to just do an intro to who you are, what you're selling, and just your general
Sure.
approach to it?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Joe. Really nice to be on the podcast. So yeah, as you said, my name is Thibaut Souyris, and so what I do is I show salespeople how to start more conversations and book more meetings, and I do that through a lot of LinkedIn content. So I post on that every day. I've got a newsletter where I share this, one tactical tip every Thursday with around 5,700 people, and I also train and coach salespeople with different training programs. So my obsession is really about booking meetings and helping people stay ahead of the curve because everything's changing so fast in prospecting. So I'm just documenting all the experiments I'm doing, and I hope people get value out of this.
Perfect. And we'll put the links to your newsletter in the description as well. And you're right, you're good at booking meetings, so we'll start there. And the way our relationship actually got going was you sent me a message on LinkedIn out the blue. I have the text here, which was Joe, Morgan mentioned that you worked together on a campaign. Would you be opposed to putting Casper in front of my 40K plus audience? Which I replied to straight away, and we did start doing. So
Yeah.
run me through it. Why does that message work so well? There's a lot of different parts of it, so just break it down for me.
Yeah. So I think so. You'll tell me after why it worked on your end, but I really like showing this example because on the chat we can see you reply within 2 minutes. So that's, I could say, the most powerful outbound message I've ever sent, and it was a connection request. And so I think it worked for a few reasons. It's a mix of nearbound prospecting, I would say, because I reached out to Morgan Ingram, who you're working with. And so, as you know, I'm doing, so you're sponsoring a lot of my content. And so, as you know, that's what I'm doing. And so I asked Morgan who I should reach out at Casper because I saw that, he was being sponsored. So I thought, okay, they must be open to this kind of conversation. He mentioned you. And so I mentioned Morgan, reached out to you. And then I used this kind of negative reversing sentence where I said, would you be opposed? And then like the kind of ridiculous claim, which was like, put that, or ridiculous to refuse claim, you could say, put your brand in front of a 40K audience. And it was really short to the point. And I think that's why it worked really well. Now I would love to tell me, why did you reply to that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's doing a lot of things that everyone says they should be on LinkedIn, but not many people are. And when I go through my messages, most of them are probably at least three times as long as this, if not longer. So straight away, got to the point. Like you said, it's a pretty crazy C2A. It's easy to reply to. You're not asking for a meeting straight away. It's just getting a conversation going. And as you said, name dropping
Mhm.
someone we're already working with. It gave so many reasons to reply to it that, and I've heard someone else say this, it means that you almost make it a silly thing to say no to, right? Even to just have that conversation going. And
Yeah.
that's really what you're trying with the meetings.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a short message that looks very simple, but making a short message like that actually requires a lot of work to think about your ICP, what they want, what problems they're trying to solve. And so, this kind of I saw a call call of a guy recently on a post from Josh Brown, and it was really amazing. It looked like it was so easy to do, but that's this kind of things. This very short stuff is really the result of actually a lot of iterations to find a message that actually looks so straightforward and gets a lot of answers. So it's easy. It's like looks simple, but it's a lot of work to actually get it right.
100%. And so just going into more of your general approach to prospecting. So zooming out a bit further and we'll break it down part by part. So starting off, are you someone who's obviously you have your own company now, so you've got a lot of different things going on. Are you someone who's still very regimented when it comes to prospecting? Are you setting up X amount of hours a day or a week to commit to prospecting, or is it more as and when you can now?
So what I'm doing is I have a prospecting routine that I stick to every day. Sometimes you have holidays, whatever, but in most cases I stick to that. And for me, that's 80% of the success in prospecting is really having a system. And a very simple way to create a system is to create a routine or a ritual around your prospecting. So I have a time block from I think 7 to 8. Yeah, because I started working at 7. 7 to 8 is really dedicated to prospecting every single weekday. So the way I do that is I really work on making sure no one can book me at this time. And then I start with my follow ups. I find 5 new prospects. I calculated that with a tool which is called the Cruising Altitude Calculator, which is a simple tool to break down your targets into daily specific activities. And then, so I find these 5 new prospects and then I add them to my sequence, meaning I start conversations. I put them in the first step of my sequence, being a connection request or a LinkedIn message. And that is something I do every single day. And that's really what allows me to create a consistent flow of outbound meetings. And it's really something I recommend everyone do, because I'm doing so many different things in the business, but this is the most important thing, making sure I have conversations with people to understand if there's problems I can help with.
Amazing. And so going into that, the actually finding the five people and the video we did together, you spoke about using influencer posts to identify people as one source of that. And is there other sources, it can be on LinkedIn, it can be others that you find yourself keep coming back to in that hour you set aside where you're finding most of the people?
Sure. So I'm lucky to have a good audience of around 37,000 people. So a lot of people are actually ending on my profile, viewing my profile. So I use that as a good way to find people who fit with my ICP. But for people who listen to us and who are not really having an audience, another really good way is to really try to understand what's the intent data your prospects are leaving. So you have different approach. You have the trigger-based approach that I call, where you find a specific post and people are flocking to this post, and then you can actually go identify the one who fit with your ICP and use the post as an excuse for reaching out. But in other cases, you have a list of accounts, and then what you would need to do is to look for people who are relevant in the account and then look for triggers. So a really simple way to start conversations, and I think it's very important as it's the beginning of the year, is to look for lost opportunities in your CRM. So for most businesses, you already had conversations, lost opportunities, people who already know your company. And it's a very good way to get started and to get some replies, get some meetings in, even though if they are not like really purely cold meetings, it's a really good source of leads. And you can use a great tool, Casper, to find phone numbers, emails, and make sure that you reach out to these people.
That's a good plug. And with the with these lost ops, how are you generally approaching these? Do you have like a template you follow? Is it really just seeing what's going on? Has anything changed in the business? How are you starting that conversation up again?
So it depends on the conversation or the relationship you have. With people who I know really well, I started a conversation like that yesterday. I'm saying, hey, what's up? I'm in Mexico right now. Are you planning to come and visit or whatever? And then you get able to start the conversation and it goes flows naturally. For people who you don't have such a, let's say, close relationship with, a really good thing is to do a framework called jobs to be done. And so here you said something like, hey, last time we talked, you were saying this was important. I found a resource and it made me think of you. Let me know if you're interested and I'll share this specific resource. And basically, that's how you can start the conversation. So I'll share again the specific link to a prospecting template. So I file that includes this message. But basically, the idea is to mention the lost opportunity, previous conversation you had, tie it to a really specific resource that you can share with. So it can be a marketing blog, it can be plenty of different things, a podcast. Really, you can plug to that. And instead of sharing it, you tease it. You say, hey, I found this, I don't know, 7 step resource on finding phone numbers when no one else can find them. Let me know and I'll send it over. Or let me know, or worth a pick. You basically ask people to reply to actually access it. It's a very good way to restart the conversation. And if people are in the business of trying to solve that problem, they most likely will want to have a conversation with you.
Nice. It makes sense. It's simple, right? Just lead with a bit of value, and like you do in your first outreach, keep it easy to reply to. And
Yeah.
with the, you mentioned again, you've got a prospecting template, and one thing that you've published recently, which is awesome and full of useful information, is your Notion template, which we'll again put in the comments, which has all of the different types of messaging templates you can use, and there's a lot in there. So how do you actually do it yourself? So you've got the one type of message you send, which is the LinkedIn one using the near bounds, which we've just spoke about.
Mhm.
But how are you actually deciding which different resources to use with different people? Is it a case of try mixing things up, or do you have quite a strict cadence you're following at the moment?
So in terms of resources, it's always, I call that a reciprocity resource. And the way I pick it is always based on the problem of my prospect. So for example, if I try to sell you another sponsoring slot or whatever, there's a very good post that Morgan did about, I don't know how you call that. It's called the SME. I don't know exactly that what it means, but basically instead of working with influencers, you're working with someone who's like taking your content and really expanding it to the world and really like making sure that you're amplifying this. And so if I'm saying, hey Joe, I want to work with you like that, what I'm going to do is use this specific resource because in your job you may be faced with having to work on influencer programs, and some may not work as well as you want, or them it's not really that easy to work with them. So I can actually go and say, hey, I found a specific resource on changing your mindset about how you work with influencers and working less with influencers and more with SMEs, we call that. So that can be really, it's always tied to the problem, what you're trying to achieve, and then it's based on that. And so I'm always going to change. If I want to sell a sales training program to a VP of sales, I'm going to look for a specific resource on setting targets at the beginning of the year or communicating new complaints. So I don't have personally any material about complaints, but I know a lot of people who are sharing on that, so I can use these and actually link to these specific resources.
Nice. I'm gonna have to keep an eye out next time you start sending me blogs again that you want to do more work together.
Yeah,
Um,
be careful.
with that, so obviously your approach is very much on the person, on the persona, making that like finding a post that's relevant to them, which is cool. How much time do you actually spend on an individual person? Because I spoke to Troy Munson a couple of weeks back, and his approach is he could research for an hour or two just on one person. But with being in
Yeah.
enterprise, having very small list of accounts, it gives him that opportunity to spend so much time researching. Do you have a strict timeline you try to follow, or is it really just keep going until you find something you know is relevant to them?
So I don't really have any set like time I stop at or follow, but basically what's really important is to understand that if you're really performing well, you're gonna get, I don't know, 20% reply rate, meaning that 80% of people you're reaching out to will not reply. So you have to keep that in mind when you're doing your research and making sure that the research is good, that you can create some really good content around this and a good trigger to get people to reply, but also think that even if the trigger is great and if this person doesn't have a problem, they most likely won't reply. So for me, it's really about spending 2 3 minutes maximum on a lead. If the lead is really important, or if I have an account based approach where I really want to work with a specific company, I'll spend more time. But it's always understanding that prospecting is about turning every stone, and 80% of the stones will not be the good ones or will not have anything under. So it's really just about making sure we're doing that. And by the way, actually, I'm just thinking about this right now, but prospecting, I think, comes from looking for gold. In the gold rush, they were having these kind of little baskets, and they were looking for gold nuggets. That's exactly what we're looking here. So we're spending so much time doing stuff where it's leading to nothing, and then you find the gold nugget. So that's really understanding this and making sure that you're prospecting like people were doing in the old time. Put in the hours, do what you have to do every day, and at some point you're going to find a gold nugget.
It's a really nice attitude to have. And I think a lot of people, when you say a 20% reply rate, they're probably jealous of that. They're nowhere near it. So with that, are you, I know LinkedIn's the big one for you. Would you say that is where most of your meetings are coming from, LinkedIn, or is there other channels you follow up with? What is the sort of success rate for you at the moment across them?
So LinkedIn, yeah, is a huge part of the opportunities that are coming for me when they are cold or warm. WhatsApp is a very good channel nowadays, but mostly to actually go and re-engage with people I already know. So for me, that's really the kind of split I have is a lot of LinkedIn, a bit of WhatsApp. Obviously, I could also work with email, but what I found is emails are extremely crowded nowadays.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're working with a company and there's one rep who's starting to send like crazy automated messages, you're most likely going to end up in the spam folder, even if your message is great. So, the lesson I would say from that is don't just stick to one channel, get more than one. And so for me, LinkedIn is really a big one. But if it ever stops working like I want, I'm gonna add more stuff: WhatsApp, call, or email.
Nice. And just to wrap it up, we ask every guest this question, and it's what should anyone doing prospecting be doing more of in 2024? And is there an example you have of someone who's doing this really well at the moment that we should speak to?
Sure. So I think what people need to do is to make sure they build a prospecting routine and that they don't do it every day. So more often is just prospect, and do that a bit every day instead of prospecting, let's say for a big day and then, stopping for the rest of the week. That's something really important. Second thing is focus on starting conversations over trying to book meetings. So if you do these two things, you're gonna, actually have a lot of really great stuff coming out of this. And someone who's doing it really well. So I've been digging a lot of content that has been shared. So I need to think, what's the name of this person again? So I don't know exactly what's her name, but she's doing like Friday cold calling, she calls. So videos where she is actually cold calling people. I can send you over her name. I just remember her face, but not really the name because I've seen one or two of the posts. But I'll send you the name.
Awesome. Yeah, you'll have to get that over to me. Well, appreciate your time today, Thibaut, and I'm sure all of this will be very helpful. There's a lot of really good tactics in there, so I'm sure people are going to enjoy this one.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Joe.